Alright, welcome back. This time we're going to be playing Joker. This was a pre-recorded video, but I wanted to kind of talk over it because it gives me time to sit down and analyze the gameplay, analyze some of the things I was doing, whether it's the build, the way I was playing, some of the combos I was doing, and how I was just using the abilities in general. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now I want to say this isn't a definitive guide to Joker. This is literally my first game with him in the live version, but I've played him pretty extensively in the test server, so I just want to go ahead and pass on that experience I've gained while playing him in the test server, since it looks like he's relatively the same as he was in that version into this version. So there are particular ways to play him. I'm not saying this is the best way, but it definitely seems the most common way to play him so far. And some of this might change as the meta shifts around him. A lot of times the hero comes out, people build him a specific way, and eventually they realize that this meta has shifted to where it counters him in such a fashion that he then has to build a little bit differently going forward for the future. But as to the current state of Joker, I think this build is pretty solid. There will be some changes based on the composition you're going against, based on who you're having issues with throughout the match. Obviously, that's always a given. You always want to adapt your build. Never stick to a simple build every single time. You want to be able to adapt so that you can effectively use your hero and effectively win the match every time. But yeah, so let's go ahead and go over the abilities real quick for those of you guys who are really new to him. So his first ability, it does a piercing shot that has extremely long range. One of the longest in game that isn't a global ability. It's pretty freaking far, as you'll see me fire at the turret from this distance. It's insane. It's great for zoning. It's great for harassing your enemy. What I mean by zoning is, for instance, if the Violet, say she's on her turret, but you don't want her to be there. You want her to be more backed up because you want to be able to push down the turret. So all you got to do is keep firing in those rockets, and it will zone her out. It will force her out of that area because she doesn't want to take unnecessary damage, allowing your minions to push, allowing your allies to push along with those minions and take out the turret effectively. That's what's great about this ability. The one downside is it does have the unfortunate side of being a skill shot. While that might not be an all bad thing, if you're really good at skill shots, is if you're really bad at skill shots, you're gonna have a hard time unless you practice, because you're gonna miss a lot of shots. Unlike Violet's, which is very similar to this ability, she rolls and does a bazooka shot, and that bazooka shot acts very similarly to this ability where it pierces through and does damage to every target. The only difference is that hers affects structures as well, whereas this one does not. And hers is targetable on a specific hero, whereas this one is completely skill shot oriented. So there are some drawbacks, but there definitely are some pros to it as well. Now let's go ahead and talk about the second ability. This has a lot of different assets that are amazing for your hero. So the first one is the most clear and cut, way of seeing how it's actually used is mobility. It gives you movement speed, so it allows you to either chase an enemy and allows you to escape an enemy when needed. And the cooldown isn't too long, relatively at least. So it's pretty good in that regards. It also has the means to break any kind of impairment. So if you're stunned, if you're being slowed, you can actually use your second ability to negate those effects and run at normal speed. Well, at least the increased speed you get from this. So not only do you break the stuns, you break any kind of impairing effects, but you also get that 30% run speed. I believe it's 30%. So that's great too. And the final one, and I believe it's the most crucial aspect to this ability, is it does negate damage for 2 seconds after activation. So you can completely ignore some abilities if you time these right. So for instance, the biggest issue I have as an ADC are assassins, or more specifically like Murad. God, he comes in, he just hits me a couple times if he needs to, or he just unloads his entire ultimate into me from the get-go or soon after, and I die. Because it's so much burst, I can't do anything. Even if I have mobility, the range on that ultimate is insane. So, unfortunately, there's not much you can do. But with Joker, because it negates damage for 2 seconds, if you were to wait until Murad, for instance, were to unload his entire ultimate into you and pop it the moment he uses his, then you would negate at least 2 seconds of the damage done during that ultimate. I'm not sure the exact duration of Murad's ultimate, but at least you would negate a very large percentage of the damage done during that duration of his ultimate, which is crucial for really squishy heroes like ADCs. So that's a really great aspect to his second ability, is the ability to negate damage for 2 seconds. Huge factor into your survivability. Now the ultimate is pretty straightforward. So what you do is you basically have a target, you'll cast your ultimate, you'll jump towards them, applying a gas canister to them, or sticks to them, and then you bounce back to your previous location. Once you bounce back, the gas canister will explode, doing pretty good damage. So it's a pretty good, it has a lot of gank potential, it has a lot of the damage you need to be a finisher, so essentially it could just be that finishing move that you need to secure that kill a lot of times. But anyways, let's get into the best part, which is this combo, which makes him so freaking scary to be against. So the one thing he has going for him, on top of these others I just mentioned, that stands out the most is this combo, because you have that passive. So what the passive does is it gives you, once you're out of combat, you have an empowered basic attack. That empowered basic attack has extra range, extra damage, and also applies a 90% slow, which slowly becomes less effective as time goes on, so eventually you get the full speed back. But combined with all those effects, it's a really good passive. And then when you combine that with your ultimate, it just compounds on it, and it's insane. So the way you want to do this is you want to be comboing these two factors into his kit. So you have the passive up, and you have the ultimate up. There's many ways you can approach this, it depends on the situation, but ideally, as long as you unload both of those, you're golden, for the most case. And this is also why I pick up items like Omni Arms, which I'll get into a little bit later, but basically it has that additional burst mechanic on top of the existing passive and the ultimate combined. It just ends up being a very bursty combo, and it kind of makes him into an assassin of sorts. So while he is an ADC, he has elements to his kit that can very well make him a really good assassin, maybe even a jungler, depending on how meta shifts around it, because he has really good potential to gank enemies. Given he has movement speed, he has that slow passive that does good damage, and of course the ultimate as well to follow up, and you know, some nice poke too to follow suit. But there we go. So we kind of did the combo there. I mean, obviously it doesn't always happen in the same sequence, but it's always awesome when you see the combo for what it really is, just clear as day, and you're just like, man, that looked like it freaking hurt. A lot of times it ends up being staggered because the fights become so sporadic that you're kind of just doing whatever. But if you can focus and you can find the target that you want and you use that combo specifically on that target, you're going to see his health drop like nothing, especially squishy heroes. But during that combo, you can also use your second ability. You can use it to, say, initiate the combo. So if they're too far away and you want to dive in there real quick, you can use your second ability to run in real fast, then lock on with your passive, slowing them down and doing damage, and then use your ultimate to follow up, doing even more damage, and then getting yourself back to safety and walk away while they die. Or you can hold on to the second ability after the combo is already expired. So therefore, if there is damage you're worried about, that you can have the means to escape it or just negate it entirely, keeping yourselves alive. But yeah, so there we go. That's kind of how he's played, at least in my experience. There might be other ways he can be played. I'm not too entirely sure. At some point, maybe I'll make a guide on him as I discover these, or as, you know, maybe meta shifts and people start introducing me to different methods of playing Joker. But that seems to be the general direction in which to play Joker. It's all about that burst. You have good sustained damage, nothing too substantial, but you have that burst mechanic, which makes it really, really nasty of a hero to deal with. And because he can negate damage, it's not always so easy to burst him down in return. And a lot of times he can escape just fine. So, let's talk about build. So the build, it kind of fluctuates a little bit, depending on your situation, the composition you're against, the heroes that are giving you issues, so on and so forth. So the most adaptable items here are probably I want to say rank breaker and the boots. I think those are the most adaptable. because Rank Breaker, you could go into like the Fenrir's Tooth. Instead of going that piercing, if there's not a lot of tanks, you can just go straight into the Fafnir's Tooth and get that even higher damage output when they hit below 40% health. But if there are a lot of tanks, getting Rank Breaker is probably a better bet, at least in my opinion. You could also stack in a Fenrir's Talon, Fenrir's Tooth, with also the Rank Breaker on top of it. But you're gonna have to adapt your build a little bit. So, anyways, again, so we have the Rank Breaker was my first item. I think it's a pretty safe item to go just because everybody has base armor anyways, and it kind of pierces right through that, and also does some pretty good damage. It's 100 damage as far as the item goes, so it's pretty good. Then from there we go into the Omni Arms or the boots. It depends on where you're sitting at. If you're in the lead, then you can probably go the boots first since it's not too expensive. You can manage to expend that gold and make up for it really quickly since you're kind of fed in ahead. But yeah, so going, let's just say we'll go boots first. So we went boots after our Rank Breaker, probably getting into the Sonic boots in normal cases because there's generally more AD based heroes in a match. But if there are a lot of AP heroes or just the hero that really is starting to carry and that team is AP based, then go ahead and get your Gilded Greaves. Then we go into the Omni Arms. So Omni Arms is the core item I feel for this particular build because it synergizes so well with that combo. So when you use an ability, your next basic attack does an additional 100% attack damage. So that's insane. It basically doubles your attack that you're doing to them on your next basic attack after using an ability, which is really, really good. Especially if you had some crit in there too. It kind of compounds into one another. So yes, it has that passive effect, giving you extra damage after using an ability. It also gives you some base attack damage, which is 70 attack damage. Kind of messed up my combo there, I just saw. I should have used my ultimate right there, but it's alright. I do end up getting somebody, and I'm trying to escape. And it looks like I will escape. Holy moly, that was crazy. But yeah. So it gives you base attack damage as well, so 70 base attack damage. It gives you lifesteal, it gives you attack speed, and it gives you some cooldown as well. Did I mention that? It gives you some cooldown. So all around, it's a great item for Joker because cooldown is actually pretty important too for him. So you can continually use that combo. So Rank Breaker gives you cooldown, and Omni Arms gives you cooldown. So that's 20% cooldown right there just from those two items, which is really, really good for him. And then we move on to the Muramasa. Muramasa is great too. Again, if you're going against tanks, it's also a very great base item since a lot of people build armor above any kind of other defenses like magic resist. Armor seems to be the go-to means to get, especially if you're building at least one armor item on your carry or whatever hero you're playing. It's going to be generally armor over anything else. It seems like. So it's just a really good item to have because of that passive and also the damage you can do in conjunction with the rest of your kit. You can also interchange that too. So for instance, if you have Rank Breaker and you don't really feel like the tanks themselves are doing anything too crazy where you have to burn through them, you can probably tend to go into a Fenrir's Tooth over Muramasa. Again, all of these are adaptable. You want to adapt your build as you go. You don't want to stick to one single build because sometimes that build won't be the best case scenario for you for the current composition you're going against. Yeah, so what I'm getting at is you go Rank Breaker or Muramasa if you're having a lot of heroes with a lot of health and a lot of armor. Generally, if they have a lot of health, in suit they also have a lot of armor. So you want to get those two items to kind of burn right through that. If you don't really have anybody with those, the increased armor or health, then you can feasibly go into other items that are more acceptable. So instead of going Rank Breaker and Muramasa, you can go into a Fenrir's Tooth, giving that increased amp damage, and also go into things like Slick Sting to have a higher chance of crit and crit damage, which works really well with your Clave Sanctity, which we'll get into next. So Clave Sanctity is also a great item to have because one, it does really good attack damage stats, or has really good attack damage stats. It gives you that crit chance as well as that run speed whenever you crit itself. So it just really makes it really great for you to look at that, dude. He couldn't do anything, and all I took was one turret shot. That's it. That's all I took, and now I'm outie, and my ultimate is almost up again. So yeah, I mean, it just all around, it's a great item for damage output. It doesn't have any cooldown, but at least it gives you some pretty good damage output all around, which makes your combo even more deadly. You don't want to just go into all these passives that are great, like the Omni Arms and getting things like, I don't know, Blitz Blade, because it gives you this really cool passive that hits multiple targets. You want to have at least one good passive, and then build everything else into like really heavy damage. You don't really want to spread yourself too thin in passives, or too much in passives. Because what happens is that you just don't have an effective build anymore. You have a lot of things happening, but the damage they're doing is very minuscule compared to when you just focus at the one passive and then build damage from there. And so my passive in general is going to be crit. That's what I'm focusing on. And so going into like that Clave Sanctity, you can get Slick Sting if you want to, amongst other items potentially if you really want that crit damage. But yeah, so there we go. So again, let's go ahead and recap the build. So if there are tanks, Rank Breaker, Omni Arms, get whatever boots suits your fancy for this current composition. So either Sonic Boots or Gilded Greaves. Then you go into like the Clave Sanctity. Clave Sanctity is great, obviously, for that damage and that crit and the run speed. Then you can go into your Miramasa, again, because they're tanks. And then from there, you go ahead and just build maybe a defensive item like the Ancestral Glory, because that means that even if you die, you revive to come back and live another day and do another combo when you revive. It makes it a great time. But anyway, look at that combo, dude. It's disgusting. Ugh. So there we go. That's for tanks. So Rank Breaker, Sonic Boots, Omni Arms, Clave Sanctity, Miramasa, and Ancestral Glory. Then you go, which is very standard. It's pretty much the default build, which is a really good build, mind you. Now, if you're going to adapt a bit, you're going to go into something a little bit differently here. You're going to go ahead and probably go more crit damage or just more top-end heavy in general. So you can probably negate one, if not both, of the Rank Breaker and the Miramasa. It's your choice if you're going to keep one of them. It depends on what you want to build into and how the game is reacting to it, how the match or the enemy heroes are reacting to it. But in general, you can go ahead and go, say for instance you're replacing both, you'll go ahead and get like the Fenrir's Tooth as your first item. Then you get your, Sonic Boots or Gilded Greaves. Go into Omni Arms, go into Slick Sting. You can go ahead and go into Clave Sanctity, and then you get like your Ancestral Glory and whatever else kind of suits your fancy that kind of builds into that. Adapt, just what I'm saying, adapt and build accordingly based on what you want to build towards. If you're going to crit damage, then go crit build. If you're going into more of a attack speed build, then more power to you. I wouldn't recommend it with him, but more power to you, right? So crit build is the way to go if you're not going super armor pierce, armor shred. You can go Spear of Longinus. It does give you cooldown. It gives you some damage and it gives you the armor shred. But the key focus I feel for him is just getting that combo in general. So I feel like it's not necessarily as great as going like a Rank Breaker by default to get the default armor shred, or getting into like the Fenrir's Tooth with just pure damage. In general, I think the primary one to change out, this is my opinion, but I think the primary one to change out, if you're going to change just one item, is instead of going Rank Breaker, go Fenrir's Tooth. And everything else can stay the same. I think that's the one item that I would most definitely change if there's no tanks. I would keep Miramasa because people are still going to build some armor against you, and that'll be nice to kind of help burn through that. But yeah, that'd be the one item I would definitely say you would change if there's no tanks. But anyways, there you go. That's how I play Joker. I was surprised to see the default build that they're recommending was pretty much on point to what we saw a lot in the test server. That's what a lot of people built. There weren't really any builds per se in the test server at the time that really said, hey, look, check out this one. They just said, coming soon. There were no builds in there. It just said, coming soon. So it's kind of interesting to see the actual default build is, in fact, very, very similar to what people were building back then. Some of the things, I'm trying to think of some of the things I may have seen outside of those items I've mentioned. Potentially, I've seen somebody use Spear of Longinus. I really have. And it seems to be okay. I just feel like it's not the best route. I really don't. And I think for good reason it's not the #1 pick to build. But yeah, there we go. Hopefully you guys found that somewhat informative. I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the match going forward since it's about to close out anyways. But that's how I play Joker. Hopefully that was a little bit more insightful as far as the normal gameplay. I like these videos because we can end up having a means to kind of talk about how the match is happening, like what specific builds I'm going for, how I'm building accordingly with my kit and how I'm using it, so on and so forth. It makes it a little bit more informative for you guys who are here to learn a little bit more, who maybe don't have as much experience as I myself, or just maybe have a few things that you might not be sure about, and maybe I can help clarify. But anyways, there we go. Let's go ahead and check out the actual score. So we got 36 points hero proficiency. Yay! Again, this was my very first match with this hero in the live version, but I did play him pretty extensively in the test server. It just looks like I haven't done anything with him ever as far as the proficiency. Proficiency isn't everything, guys. I think it's funny when people are like, he's never played the hero, he's gonna suck. And then he's like really, really good because mechanically he's really sound, or he's played that hero a bunch on another version. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.